The Aethelgard Empire thought Earth would be an easy target. A primitive planet with divided nations and outdated technology. But they made one fatal mistake. They forced humanity to unite. When the first alien beam hit the atmosphere, the humans didn't beg for mercy. Instead, every nation stopped fighting each other and turned their eyes toward the stars. They launched thousands of metal missiles, ignoring the mathematical certainty of their own defeat. Our commander was horrified as he watched a burning human ship accelerate and ram straight into our mothership. The pilot didn't even try to escape. That was the day we learned the most terrifying word in the human language: total war. We realized too late that a human will happily burn his own world down, just to make sure the enemy has nowhere to stand. After the first month of the war, we realized that humans were not just fighters. They were thieves of technology. They didn't have plasma shields or warp drives, so they simply took ours from the wreckage of the ships they had crashed. Our engineers were horrified to find that within weeks, humans had dismantled our captured drones and bolted our advanced laser cannons onto their primitive tanks, using nothing but crude welds and heavy bolts. They didn't understand the complex physics of our weapons, but they didn't need to. They just figured out which button made the death light come out. By the time we launched our second wave, the sky wasn't filled with primitive rockets anymore. Instead, we were met by human-made jets powered by stolen alien engines, piloted by men who laughed as they pushed the machines far past their safety limits. We realized then that humanity doesn't need to invent a weapon to defeat you. They will simply kill you with your own inventions. This was no longer an invasion. It was a galactic arms race where the humans were winning by taking everything we left behind. The final realization came when we attempted to glass the planet from orbit, thinking we could end the resistance without ever touching the ground. But we had forgotten the most dangerous human trait, their ability to thrive in the dark. Instead of hiding in bunkers, human suicide squads had already infiltrated our supply lines, using the very warp gates we had built to bring in reinforcements. They didn't want to capture our ships. They wanted to turn them into bombs. I watched on my monitor as our largest dreadnought, the Titan-class flagship of the galaxy, was detonated from the inside by a single human, who had bypassed our biometric locks with a simple piece of copper wire and a grin. As our fleet burned in the atmosphere, a final message was broadcast from Earth on all frequencies. It wasn't a call for peace or a negotiation. It was a warning. You brought the war to our house, now we're coming to yours. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Aethelgard Empire felt the cold chill of true fear. We didn't just fail to conquer Earth. We had accidentally taught a species of predators how to hunt between the stars. The war wasn't ending, it was just moving to our doorstep. The retreat from Earth was not an escape. It was a chase. We jumped through hyperspace, thinking we had left them behind, but the humans had learned to track our warp bleed signatures. For months, we sat in the safety of our home system, believing our deep space defenses were impenetrable. Then, the sensors picked up a massive object decelerating near our moons. It wasn't an army or a fleet, it was a single hollowed-out asteroid, strapped with hundreds of our stolen engines and packed with millions of tons of high explosives. They hadn't built a ship to reach us. They had turned a piece of their own solar system into a bullet. On the side of the rock, in giant letters visible from our observation decks, they had painted the names of the cities we destroyed. We realized then that human revenge is not a feeling, it is a project. They didn't come to conquer our planets or take our resources. They came to show us that the cost of attacking Earth was the total deletion of our history. As the asteroid impacted our primary shipyard, the final broadcast reached us. Debt collected. Thelians now knows that humans will travel across the void, not for glory, but to finish what you started. The aftermath of the asteroid strike left our empire in ruins, but the true horror was what came next, the silence. We expected a final invasion, a grand fleet to finish us off, But the humans did something far more terrifying. They surrounded our home star with a network of ghost satellites, automated drones built from our own salvaged scrap that blocked all our outgoing signals. They didn't want to kill us all. They wanted to put us in a cage. We were the most advanced civilization in the sector, yet we were now prisoners in our own system, forced to watch through telescopes as the humans began to colonize the rest of the galaxy. Every time we tried to launch a ship, a single human message would flash on our screens. Stay inside. You aren't ready to play with others yet. We realized that humanity had become the very thing we claimed to be, the guardians of the stars, but with a much darker sense of humor. They left us alive as a living museum, a warning to any other alien race that dared to mistake human kindness for weakness. The hunters had become the zookeepers, and we were the first exhibit. Years passed, and we became a ghost story whispered in the halls of the new Galactic Federation. The cage the humans built was perfect, not because of its walls, but because of the psychological mirror it held up to us. We watched as humanity did the impossible. They didn't just replace us. They united the species we had once oppressed. They used our old trade routes to spread art, medicine, and that strange, chaotic human culture. One day, a small, unarmed human shuttle broke the silence and docked at our crumbling central station. A lone human stepped out, carrying nothing but a small digital tablet. He didn't come to gloat or to kill our remaining leaders. He handed us a file containing our own history, our music, and our lost archives that we thought had burned with our cities. "We kept these for you," he said simply. "A species that forgets its past has no future." In that moment, we understood the final, most confusing human trait, their capacity to forgive. They had destroyed our military, caged our ambition, and then they gave us back our soul. They didn't want us to be their slaves. They wanted us to be their neighbors, but only after they had proven that they were the masters of the void. The war was finally over, not with a bang, but with a handshake. The galaxy eventually reached a state of human peace, a strange era where no one dared to draw a weapon. But as we, the former Aethelgard Empire, began to step out from our cage and join this new federation, we noticed something unsettling. The humans were no longer the aggressive, loud warriors we had fought. They had become quiet, almost tired. We discovered that they had spent their entire spirit and every resource to protect the galaxy from us, and in doing so, they had neglected their own world. Earth was tired, its resources thin, and its people were now spread across the stars like seeds. When we asked a human diplomat why they didn't just take our rich planets for themselves after they won, he just said, "Because then we would have become you. And we promised ourselves we'd be better." It was the ultimate victory of the human spirit. They chose to struggle in honor rather than thrive in tyranny. We realized that the humans didn't just win the war. They won the argument of how a civilization should exist. They were the galaxy's weary older brothers, standing guard over a peace they were too exhausted to enjoy, yet too proud to abandon. The final chapter of our history began when a new threat emerged from the deep void, a dark, mechanical swarm from another galaxy that even our most advanced math couldn't comprehend. We were terrified, but the humans simply stood up and dusted off their old, battered ships. They didn't ask for help, and they didn't ask for payment. They formed a line in front of every inhabited planet, acting as a shield for those who were once their enemies. We watched in awe as the weary guardians fought one last time, using their remaining strength to push back the darkness. When the swarm was finally defeated, the humans didn't build a new empire. They simply turned their ships around and headed back to their quiet, distant home. They had proven that the greatest power in the universe isn't the ability to destroy, but the courage to protect. We finally understood that the galaxy didn't belong to the strongest or the smartest, but to those who were willing to stand for something bigger than themselves. The legend of the human spirit was no longer a story of war, but a light that would guide us all for the next 1,000,000 years. Eventually, a day came that we never expected. The humans invited us to Earth, not as prisoners or students, but as guests to a ceremony they called the Final Passing. When we arrived, we didn't find a high-tech fortress or a sprawling military base. We found a quiet planet of gardens and ancient ruins. The humans had grown old. Their ambition for the stars had faded, replaced by a deep desire to simply rest. They led us to a massive stone vault where they had stored the collective knowledge of every species they had ever met, including ours. "The universe is yours now," the last human elder told us. "We've spent our time fighting, building, and protecting. Now we just want to sleep." One by one, their great ships were deactivated and their cities were given back to nature. They didn't go extinct. They simply chose to stop being the center of the story. They handed the keys of the galaxy to the very races they had once fought, trusting us to maintain the peace they had bled for. As we left the planet, looking back at the small blue marble, we realized the humans had achieved the impossible. They were gone from the throne. But their shadow remained, a silent promise that if the darkness ever returned, the sleepers of Earth would wake once more. Millennia passed, and the humans became nothing more than a myth, a ghost story told to children about the ancient giants who once ruled the stars. With iron and heart, the Federation they built had flourished, but as peace turned into complacency, the old greed began to resurface. New empires rose, forgotten weapons were rediscovered, and the galaxy stood on the brink of a civil war that would have burned every sun. But just as the first shot was about to be fired, every screen, every cockpit, and every communication device in the universe flickered to life. It wasn't a message of war or a command to stop. It was the simple, rhythmic sound of a human heartbeat. The ghost satellites that had been silent for ages began to glow, and the ancient stone vault on Earth opened, broadcasting a single, final archive of the Great War. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as they saw the cost of the peace they were about to throw away. The humans didn't need to return. Their legacy was a self-correcting system, the mere memory of what humanity was capable of. Both their terrible destruction and their infinite mercy was enough to make the greatest armies lower their wings. We realized then that the humans had never really left. They had simply moved from the physical world into our very conscience. The heartbeat signal didn't just stop the war. It triggered the final evolution of the human legacy. Deep within the core of the ancient stone vault on Earth, a hidden countdown reached zero, and a fleet of siege ships launched into the void. These weren't warships or colony vessels. They were terraforming engines carrying the DNA and memories of every world the humans had ever protected. They traveled to the dead corners of the galaxy, turning barren rocks into lush, living paradises within decades. We realized that the humans had spent their final years on Earth, not just resting, but preparing a garden for everyone else to inherit. This wasn't just about peace anymore. It was about life blooming where there was once only cold, empty space. The Federation watched as the galaxy literally doubled in size. As new worlds became habitable, they had ensured that the universe would be too busy growing to ever think about fighting again. In the end, the galaxy returned to Earth one last time to find the planet completely empty of people, but filled with monuments. At the very spot where the first alien ship had landed centuries ago, there stood a simple, unadorned pillar made of white stone. It didn't list victories or names of generals. It had one sentence carved into it in every known language. "We were here, we loved you, and now you are ready." As the representatives of 1,000 species stood before it, the ghost satellites finally self-destructed in a beautiful display of light, turning into a permanent ring of glittering dust around Earth. The cage was gone, the guardians were gone, and the conquerors were gone. Humanity had completely vanished into the stars, leaving behind a galaxy that was finally mature enough to rule itself. We looked up at the night sky and realized that we weren't living in the shadow of humans anymore. We were living in their light. The story of the Alien POV ended that day, because there were no more aliens left, only a single united family of the stars, forever grateful to the stubborn, violent, and beautiful species that had taught them how to be alive.